He has spearheaded hotels across India, renowned Indian and international brands, positioning them as leaders in the market. Known as the man with the Midas touch, Mr. Bhatnagar is currently responsible for strengthening and elevating Leela's positioning as an epitome of true Indian luxury while driving the brand's future growth. Joining him on stage are Mr. Alan Watts, President Asia Pacific, Hilton, Mr. Dimitris Manikis, President Europe, Middle East, Africa, Wyndham Hotels and Resorts, Mr. Garth Simmons, Chief Executive Officer, Asia Premium, Midscale and Economy, Accor, Mr. Rajeev Menon, President Asia Pacific, excluding Greater China, Marriott International, and Mr. Rajesh Magow, co-founder and group CEO, MakeMyTrip. Everyone, please give them a round of applause.
Can you hear me? I mean,
They can.
Who made it? Right. So I think you can't get a panel bigger than that. So I have the easy job of, asking all these head honchos who are probably controlling 90% of the business in Asia Pacific and beyond to kind of speak up. So in the last, I think we guys are having a dream run. When I say we guys, I'm talking about hospitality, travel trade. I mean, it's been amazing the last few years. We never thought that these days will come in. Every matrix is on high double digit. Everything, whether it's revenue, it's ADR, it's occupancy, it's demand, everything's working. I'm talking from an Indian context. Just a quick warm-up question, and we can probably start with Rajesh, because you are the Mr. Data guy here. Like, what do you think are the lasting trends which you think will last? And are there any one or two trends that we should be cautious about, which you think will probably need to peter down or plateau out? And then this goes round in sequential order. So Alan, you can prep up yours after he finishes.
Sure. Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Anuraag, and good morning, everyone. And thank you once again. I think awards did the trick to have 200 people in the room, I guess. So let me just give you one big trend, which I think is going to stay here, I believe, for a decade or two. And then I'm sure you'll all sort of going to love that, is after so many years, now what we've started seeing is the consumer, the traveler, is willing to spend more in India, is willing to spend more out of the disposable income on travel and experiences. Now, this trend gets validated when we see, the demand coming, let's say, on our platform. You get a ton of traffic, from tier 2, tier 3 cities, right? It's not tier 1 cities, it's not top 15 cities, it's actually tier 3 cities. In tier 3 cities, our searches would have grown last year on year by 25%. So, it sort of gets validated with that. Let me tell you one more thing which is going to be a multiplier effect on this. This is the story so far. And the multiplier effect is going to come from, if you look at the country's disposable income today at the country level, you divide that by essentials and the discretionary, the share of discretionary is about 20%. In the next 5 years, by 2030, it's going to get double. This 20% discretionary income is going to get to about 40% discretionary income in India. And then if you link it with the point that I was making earlier, the more the discretionary income and the consumer behavior is to spend more, maybe thanks to COVID, life is short and the rest of it, you will see, this trend absolutely continuing for the next, I would say at least a decade, if not more. Then I'll tell you one thing that which was short-lived, and we all, if you go back, like let's say the last 3-4 years, or even post-COVID, when it was recovering, we were all talking about it, we were all skeptical about it, was this whole video conferencing, especially in the context of travel. It's all going to be online, and it's not going to be, people will be afraid of travel, people will be afraid of coming to offices, etc. And see how short-lived that was. I think it's going to go out of the window completely. Look at this conference. Manu was telling me yesterday there's 750 odd people as against 600 people last year, right? And last year was a bit of a pent-up because you were coming out of the pandemic and so on. And you look at the people traveling, you look at the crowd at airports, you look at the crowd at railway stations, you look at the crowd at any destination, leisure, business travel, you name it. Everybody's out there to travel. So I think, one, of course, public memory is always very, very short. But the fact that in some specific cases, when it comes to experiences, and travel is definitely one of the experiences, one of the mainstream experiences category, nothing takes away from social interactions, going out there, looking at it live, rather than watching it through online. So some of the technologies, let's say metaverse was a lot of people were talking about. There was a lot of hype about it, and saying metaverse is going to replace, and I will see it on the virtually all the destinations. Not going to happen. People are actually going beyond the key destinations. They are exploring untapped destinations completely as well. So I think that's completely gone. That is short-lived for sure. And the one that I'm very, very optimistic and bullish about is this whole consumer pattern changing with the discretionary income.
Great. Anything you'd like to add or agree or disagree from your perspective, Alan?
Look, I think two, one from an international perspective and then one from a local perspective, the latter, which is a far bigger opportunity. The largest traveling population in the world today is China outbound. It's 125 million outbound trips. What we're starting to see, if you map, macro India economy over the decades to come, is India becomes the second largest traveling population on the planet. And Indians travel similar to everybody else. I think experience, I think trend, everything Rajesh says I agree with, but they do travel generationally different. So Indian leisure traveler, high-end Indian leisure outbound traveler is a 3-generation traveler, and that's different. China travels the same way that Japan used to travel, starts with group tour, ends up in FIT, and then the FITs become confident and they travel again. Then when they re-travel with family, they'll come with mum and dad and the kids. A well-held Indian outbound traveler travels with grandparents, parents, and children. So you get a 3G traveler, and that does change as Indian outbound volume, particularly leisure, ends up skewing the world as China has done. You see, China offerings from a food perspective everywhere in the world now. You used to see Japanese and still do Japanese offerings everywhere in the world. It is going to change hotel design. You do need to be mindful in your leisure design that if you are seeking to attract an Indian outbound traveler, that you have to do 3G. So that means not an interconnecting room, an interconnecting corridor, where you can make apartments at the end of the corridor and they stay longer. The bigger opportunity in the near and present one, and building on Rajesh's point, is consumer confidence in India. If you think of our industry, it's a pyramid, right? Uber luxury at the top, large format in the middle, focused service or limited service, or whatever companies call it, different things. Investing for return in the limited service or focused service industry in India is the next big thing. If we think of 100 million new consumers over the next 18 months join the consumer class in India, so therefore join the travel cycle, and they're not going to stay in any of our existing brands today. They are truly entry-level customers. Now, Oyo was the first to test the model and try and organize the disorganized sector. But if you look at the mechanics, and this was spoken about a little bit on stage yesterday, of what happened in the US with the superhighways, what happened in China and Belt and Road, the infrastructure build in India and consumer confidence and new consumers in India, the next big movement will be focused service, limited service, hotels, 60 keys and below, all across India in the thousands, because it's happened in every single market in the world where you've had an emerging middle class and an entry-level traveler. And one of the first things that new consumers do when they have disposable income is travel for experience. So I think whatever we say in the next 10 years, there'll be lots of things to say about large format hotels. I think luxury gets better and better. The big change that we're going to see is an explosion in the bottom end of the sector.
Anything that we need to be cautious about, anything where we are being overtly optimistic? This is all great news, but...
India is a cyclic market. Travel and tourism is a cyclic market, right? We're on the other side of the pandemic. I think reasons to believe there's a longer cycle this time is it's coming after infrastructure build and it's domestic. And it's based on, I suppose, the consumer, some of the consumer buoyancy is based on insourcing, not outsourcing. Outsourcing was easy to take away. And so when 2008 happened, people took outsourcing away. If we're in Bangalore, go to Manyata and drive around the tech park. It's no longer big outsourcing companies, it's insourced. It's real money, it's real capital, it's depreciated assets, it's every global brand that you can think of have a base and a presence in India. And because it's their money and their depreciated assets, they're here to stay. So I would say, of course our business is cyclic and we shouldn't get ahead of ourselves, but domestic and infrastructure are the biggest precursors for a long and sustainable cycle.
Thank you, and I think that's great to hear, and I think, so I'll kind of come back to you, Dimitri, because Alan has kind of led me on to a very important point, that India's outbound, the multi-generational travel, and, ever-growing Indian demographic, the dividend that we all talk about, India's outbound potential is huge. And last year, when Anthony Capiano was here in India, he spoke about Destination India. He spoke about the fact that how relevant and how critical the Indian subcontinent is in terms of global travel and all that. I want to check from you, Raj, given the distribution and the hotels that you have, and then from you, Garth, in terms of what are we doing to bring in inbound? Because the reach, our dependence on Incredible India 1, Incredible India 2, the statistics don't stack up. India's inbound today on the experiential luxury side, you take away the corporates and all, is less than 1 million, less than 10 million, right? And if 16 to 17% of this is from Bangladesh, and then there are family traveling. So does Marriott, Accor, Hilton, anyone have a strategy for using your huge, phenomenal database and loyalty members for Destination India?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the potential for travel to India, you're going to continue to see that increase dramatically year on year. I think what you've got to keep in mind is coming out of COVID, and we often forget, our memories are short. COVID restrictions only got dropped about 2 years ago, right? It was really at the end of 21, early first quarter 22 is when we dropped the restrictions. So for international leisure travel to come to India will take a little bit more time, but it'll come. Business travel is already starting to come back pretty strong. So I think globally, everybody is now got India on their sights. From our perspective, with our 200 million plus Marriott Bonvoy customers, all these new destinations that we are creating, the one we are sitting at, for example, there is a huge desire to come and explore these destinations. And I'll give you a simple perspective. In this city alone, we operate 19 hotels. 75% of the occupancy of these hotels are Marriott Bonvoy customers. And they're not locals. They're not all locals. There are many locals because we've got 6 million plus Bonvoy members. But there's a lot of international travel, in many cases business travel. Now, as Rajesh said, as new markets open up, as Ranthambore goes from having one Villas and Amman and a couple of other places to a few more, you're going to suddenly start creating the capacity to accommodate more tourists. And what the country has been doing, at least in the last 5 years, is infrastructure development. And I think that is now starting to show results. So first, folks to take advantage of these kind of offerings and mobility, accessibility is also obviously going to be the locals. But as the word spreads out, you're going to start seeing international traffic starting to come through, right? To your question earlier about what we need to be cautious about, right? I think, again, to what I said, just 2 years ago, we were in coma, almost life support, and most of us in the industry trimmed ourselves. We did a lot of work to streamline our business, right? What happens when good times come? We tend to all fatten up, right? And I think as an industry, we need to remember to use the learnings that we all went through just a couple of years ago and make sure that we continue to apply those learnings and things like productivity levels and our focus on being able to stay very driven in driving, multitasking and things like that continue to be worked on versus going back to the days of pre-COVID where, if suddenly there's a dip again, you'll end up in a little bit of a difficult place. And I think the big way to do it is early adapters for artificial intelligence. I do believe there is an incredible opportunity for our industry to take the leap in terms of start adopting artificial intelligence to really start focusing on various elements of the business. How we can help our teams sell better, how we can help our teams be more productive, and so on and so forth. So that's just broadly my perspective.
Sure. No, thank you, Raj. I think it's quite relevant. And as you said, most of the inbound travel is now corporate related. People have started covering for business, but inbound for leisure. Discretionary spend is yet to happen. Do you see the same trend and the same pattern, Garth?
Yeah, listen, I'll touch on the first part of the first question you mentioned before about inbound. It's coming from a low base, isn't it? I mean, as you sort of mentioned, 1 million inbound travellers into into India, which is such a large country. I think it'll follow the outbound travel. Ultimately, what is there, 47 international airports today in India? I think the call is, and a lot of that's all about outbound travel, really, outbound and coming back home. I think as the Indians travel out and the rest of the world discovers that traveller, they'll want to discover India as well because the news and the story will get out. Because India is a beautiful place. Every time I come back to India, you see more and more of India, and it's too large for anyone to see. But I think that will grow. There's no doubt. Obviously, the big focus. So we heard Sebastian yesterday on his keynote speech talking about we want to grow in India so we can have the outbound travellers into the rest of the globe, particularly that Asian region, which 80% of the travel will go to start with. But the international travel in will follow, there's no doubt. But even without that, the volume of internal travel is huge, right? It's huge. And I wanted to touch on the first question that was asked. You sort of spoke about trends and what would happen. I mean, I think a couple of things you want to talk about a little bit about sustainability. Sustainability's here and it's growing really quickly, and it's going to be rampant as far as its growth. It's not going anywhere as far as the conversations. Even if there's a bit of lip service in some places on it, that will turn into actual actions, I think, as well. And other trends as well is, I think, the volume of growth. I mean, okay, it's not just India. It's actually Asia. I think Asia is the new world, right? I think that's the place. We're very fortunate to be in this part of the world, I think, and we're going to see extraordinary growth. It's not 5, 10, it's 20 years' time, I think we're going to see. And the pressure on accommodation in our industry, I think we're very blessed to be in this industry, is going to be enormous. So that supply-demand is going to push as well. I think another question I think you had there before was the double-digit growth that we've actually seen in our industry. Will it continue at that rate? Listen, there's a fair chance it will. I mean, the supply-demand situation everywhere is huge, right? Particularly in a place like India. A lot of talk about infrastructure, yeah. Infrastructure, actually, love him or hate him, the government in this country, they've done a lot in that infrastructure space over the terms that they've had, and you would suggest that'll continue, and that's only going to improve the country. But that infrastructure spend is huge. We obviously battle in India, like everyone does, with being able to get development sites off the ground. You sign something, it's very different to the rest of the world, right? The bureaucracy as far as the movement through, it'll take almost twice as long to have a thought of a development site and the launch of a development site in India, and that's only going to continue to push and hold that supply-demand situation here as well, I think.
Okay, great. Dimitri, what's your take on the first part of the first question and the second part and the third part of the second question?
That's a good thing about being last.
Yes.
Yeah.
At some point, I think Alan was working for Wyndham. I mean, it's exactly how we grew. You're so right. We grew, if you look at what we've done in the US, that's exactly what we grew all these years. You know, I don't know if it's true, but we tend to say in the US that every 10 minutes you're going to find another Wyndham. And by the way, you know why? Because of the Indian diaspora. 40–50% of our clients in the United States of America is of Indian origin, and they all come from Gujarat, and they're all called Patels. It's the famous Patel Motel cartel, and don't underestimate the power of the Indian diaspora. That at some point they're going to discover India and they're going to come back. Just for we had a global conference in about a year ago in the United States, and there were about 7,000 delegates, and 6,000 or 4,500 they were actually called Patels. And I was on stage, and I was very nervous talking to 7,000 people. And I said to my boss, "I'll tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to say, Mr. Patel, your wife is on the phone, and 4,000 people are going to leave the room." So that's exactly what I think is going to happen in India. And Alan is so right. It's all about the infrastructure development. It's all about how all these people, when they travel from one place to another, they will need somewhere to stay. And Wyndham, with our Days Inn, Super 8s, Ramadas, that's what we've done, and that's how we grew. One thing that you need to be extremely proud, and an Indian is not proud just being in India. I think in Indians, and as I said, I'm half Indian now. It's the way that you have grown hospitality around the world. The AHOA conference is actually happening this week. I don't know if I'm sure you guys are there as well. So the AHOA conference is the biggest hospitality conference in the US. AHOA is the Asian Americans Hospitality Association. They've got 60,000 members. They're the backbone of hospitality in the United States, and they're all Indian diaspora. It's just amazing what you guys have achieved outside of India. And I think that will actually come back. It will eventually. All these people that they love India, they love, they have their families here, they're going to come back. And that's the model they're going to deploy at some point coming back to India. It's going to be Columbus the reverse. They're going to come back and they're going to say, we're going to develop in India. So we're very bullish on the infrastructure development. We believe that limited service, exactly as Alan said, we are the leaders in that space with our Days Inn, Super 8s. We believe we've got an amazing future. And I'll give you another example. One of the things that we thought about Wyndham, where do we go next? We realized that CIS, outside of Russia, excluding Russia for the reasons we all know, it's the fastest growing market for us. You know why? Because of the Chinese Belt Road. They're actually building the Belt Road. So the Azerbaijanis, Kyrgyzstan, Kazakhstan, Georgia, they're all developing now these amazing hotels in the Belt Road to service the infrastructure development. So for me, that's where the future is. That's exactly where the future is. Can something go wrong? Yes. Anything can go wrong. But you know what? At this point in time, you only focus on what can go right. And from what I see here, what I saw yesterday, when I heard Sebastian talking about his plans for India, and I think that in your strategy meetings, you were all talking about the same thing, and that's why we're all here. We didn't suddenly discover America. We actually discovered that this place has more potential than anybody ever thought. You just do it in a way that fits the local culture and the local way of doing things. You cannot walk in here thinking, I've got all the answers, let me tell you how this thing is done. No. Wrong, mate. I think these people right here, they know far better than we do. And that's what we're all gradually learning.
No, there's a lot.
Just to build on one point, because we're being wildly bullish as you would expect at an industry conference to keep us safe. Raj touched wonderfully on inbound, but let's be honest about infrastructure and building ahead of infrastructure getting completed. There's potential investors in the room. Luxury inbound in India and luxury properties such as your great portfolio is well underpriced. To think that the best hotel in Delhi is less than $300 US is a travesty. And you think of the beautiful sites, people are starting to talk about the religious sites in the north of India. The reality is the well-heeled $500, $800 US customer that doesn't come to India today and loves the idea of it. As Raj talked about, his 200 million members. You combine all of our loyalty programs, you've probably got 1 billion members. The top end of that program is not going to sit for 13 hours in a car to go anywhere. And so the reality is, if you are investing ahead of infrastructure, particularly everybody wants to do full service and everybody wants to do luxury, you've got to make sure, that's the bigger risk in the industry. Right? For years, people have built hotels and there's brownfields existing in India because they've wanted to build at a high end, and the thesis has been India will get back to a $350, a $450, a $550 rate. The watch out is at the top end not getting into a boom in luxury travel before the infrastructure comes. I mean, we're all pleased to see that Gurgaon to Jaipur has halved in length of time, but that needs to keep going and get completed. And I would say, to not to be a pessimist, but that is the biggest risk. Not that the infrastructure doesn't get done, but you buy the land, you build your hotel before it gets there. The thesis of your hotel is $200 or $300 above what it actually does, and that's how we got into the trouble last time. So I would say for the inbound perspective, yes, at a macro perspective, it will be great in the future, but timing is everything when it comes to when to break ground and when to build.
I think it definitely works for Wyndham.
I
I'm convinced.
I was going to...
No, don't comment on my socks. That's the only thing I could afford. I'm Greek. Come on, man. Don't look at my socks, please. Please, don't.
Matching with the necktie.
I can't do it.
No.
So I think you're right. So you're right. Brand India, a lot of potential, still kind of priced at $300, $350, even on the luxury side. Although when the spike rates go up during peak season, it is touching close to $1,000 now, as you know. Which brings me to the luxury brands that you all operate out of India. I think there's obviously the brand architecture, the design, the whole differentiators of the brand when it comes to the product part of it. But where you have more than one luxury brands, for in case like you have the St. Regis and the Ritz-Carlton, and you have the Waldorf coming up, and you already have the Conrads playing in India, and you have 2 Raffles in Udaipur, one in Udaipur, one opening soon in Jaipur, and a Fairmont. Now, maybe whoever wants to go first, really. How do you create the differentiators from a brand delivery experiential standpoint? Not just on the brand architecture. It's like how, from a consumer lens, how is the experience at a St. Regis significantly differentiated from an experience at a Ritz-Carlton? Likewise, probably at a Waldorf or a Conrad, or a Raffles, what you would offer in a Singapore, typically, to a Raffles in Udaipur, which is primarily more inclined towards group bookings and socials.
So let me give it a start. First of all, when you think about our portfolio of luxury hotels, JW Marriott, we have 10 operating, another 13 or 14 under construction, is by far, from an international brand point of view, the fastest growing luxury brand in the country. It's very clearly defined in terms of specs, in terms of expectations, not only from food and beverage experience point of view. In resorts, we've tried to create a destination out of it. So when you think about this hotel, when you think about what we have in Missouri, or when we think about the hotel that we signed yesterday, which is the JW Marriott in Alibag, where we would be, having a ranch with horses, and on the beach, you can do all kinds of different stuff other than the traditional wedding and conventions and other, large format meetings. That's what a JW delivers in this country, right? A St. Regis experience is a little bit more personalized, and you ran a St. Regis hotel, the way we delivered on those expectations, and it's a super successful brand in the country. Ritz-Carlton, we've got 2 operating, we've got a bunch more coming, and you'll see the positioning from Ritz-Carlton perspective is again going to be in that uber luxury space. As we develop more resorts, it'll define the experience other than just the city hotels. So we believe as we've grown our luxury portfolio, and today Marriott has the largest luxury portfolio in the world with about 600 operating hotels and considerable pipeline. it's about clearly defining the swim lanes and our customer being able to understand and appreciate that. It's been very clear since we actually came together with Starwood, St. Regis customer is a different customer to a Ritz-Carlton. Now, in some cases, they will overlap, right? They will show up in a city and say, but there is no Ritz-Carlton, I'm going to go and stay at the St. Regis because that's what I want to be part of because of Marriott Bonvoy. Fair enough. But if they have those options in close proximity, there is a very clear customer choice, and we see that across the board.
Right.
Yeah, actually, rather than going back into that, only because all of our answers are going to be 1 degree of separation, really, when we're talking about in that luxury space. I probably want to talk more about making sure that you're not developing in locations that aren't right? So making sure that the three most important things are covered every time. It's that you have the right location for the right brand, and then of course the right partner. And if any of those are off, then you're going to have an unsuccessful product or unsuccessful asset moving forward. So I think that's the most important thing in that space. This Indian market that we're in now, the largest, and we shouldn't forget that, and just be talking about luxury, the largest part of that market is that mid-scale market, mid-scale premium market. That's the major part of this market, and that's going to be the push growth as well. You sort of mentioned raffles. Like, how many raffles should you have in a place like India, right, at the moment? And that's going to change over time as those tier 2 cities become tier 1 and the like as well, but you need to make sure you've got the right location. You sort of mentioned the raffles in Udaipur. It's a lovely asset on an island, and it has a wonderful experience. I'm sure Alan will touch on that a little bit more as far as his brands and separation. But I think the most important thing is that you've got you're really driving the right product in the right location for the right clientele. I think it's really important.
So I think what I was trying to just understand, because given the demographics of India and the growing luxury population,
Sure.
do we have to kind of refine, curate, and fine-tune like what would be a typical raffle standard globally versus what you would execute in, let's say, in Udaipur, where probably 65 to 70% of your business would be MICE and socials. I'm sure it's easier to deliver in a 60-key hotel opening in Jaipur, which is primarily FFIT or FIT led.
I think if you're specifically talking about top end for us and the raffles in Fairmont, I mean, the good examples they are sitting here in this country. If you look at Udaipur and Jaipur, right? Fairmont's a larger box, bigger assets. That hotel that's sitting in Jaipur is a very friendly Indian wedding market. This is a big part of its market as well. That's very different to what a Raffles is. Raffles in general would be a smaller asset, very personalised, a lot of space, very unique to the location, what it is as well. That's a great asset we've got here in Udaipur. You go to Singapore, you see the asset there. It was where it was born, Raffles as well. You go to the Old World office in London, very specific. It's got a lot of history attached to it as well. So they're probably the differentiations of it. Rather than writing a textbook on what a standard of that looks like, it really becomes about a bit of essence of the property and product as well, right? If we're talking about the difference in that space.
Alan, you want to add something on this?
Look, we're all in the real estate business first and foremost, right? So Conrad's the largest brand in the world, Waldorf Astoria invented luxury, yada, 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 right? The reality is, if you're building a hotel, first things first, the plot of dirt that it's on is the primary reason to buy for anyone, anywhere in the world. People shop location first, then they shop brand, and then they shop price point. And so in order to do a great luxury hotel, a great large format hotel, a great focus service hotel, it starts with the right location. You're only as good as your last asset. Then if you're going to get competitive advantage in a market share premium, you need to build something that's architecturally relevant or architecturally different, that the customer is going to equate your property with the alternatives across the road. And yes, the massive loyalty engines help, and the brand helps, particularly when it relates to inbound, but it starts with the fundamentals of hotel keeping that have been around for 100 years. Is it the right real estate? Is it the right asset on the right real estate? And is the underwriting of that asset going to make sense? And then can you get a premium? So we can have a long, and somewhat futile conversation of a Raffles versus a Ritz-Carlton versus a Waldorf Astoria versus a Four Seasons, the fundamentals of luxury under that industry are best-in-class owner returns and keeping the industry safe. So we all go through the same thing. Do we believe, so I've got a Waldorf Astoria coming in Jaipur, do I believe that that's the right piece of real estate, at least equivalent, if not superior to where the competition's going to be? Is it going to be architecturally equivalent and or better? Is it going to have a sustainable competitive advantage, i.e. points of difference that are different than the competitors? And is the brand halo going to add value to a wedding destination? And then to your good point, you're regionalizing everything in every market. If you've got a domestic customer, you're regionalizing for that customer. So the Waldorf Astoria, Shanghai and Beijing look about as different as you can get from the Waldorf Astorias in the US, and look as different as you can get from Admiralty Arch or Bangkok or Maldives. They feel like they're part of the brand, but they're fully regionalized to that. And in India, that means social catering, that means wedding demand. I think what we need to be careful of is to be good stewards of other people's money. I mean, the reality is, if you're sitting on this stage, with the exception of Rajesh, we're in the other people's money business. We have the privilege of managing their assets. And so we have got, our well-intended owners in trouble before on making bad decisions. So I would say, from my perspective, Waldorf Astoria, to answer the uber luxury, is the brand I say no to the most, because I don't want to be associated with signing something on brand just because we can. There's a reason that we don't have a Waldorf, that we've got one in Bangkok, KL, Hanoi, and not Singapore. And that reason is just, I don't want to lead someone down a path where I can't make sure that they deliver the best-in-class premiums they stand for. In some cases, that means I do work for Wyndham, although I can't pass the dress code. And I'm saying, rack and stack a Hampton on the same piece of real estate in a downtown city, and you will make more money. It's not as sexy, it's not as flashy. Your Rolls Royce is going to look funny sitting in front of it, but it's a better use of assets. So I do think, for us to have a sustainable industry that we all want to have, we need to be mindful in keeping new investors safe. And sometimes that means saying no, not yes, and leading them to a better return.
So that leads me to Wyndham.
No, I 100%. And the only problem with Alan, I cannot afford him. But I'll tell you what. What do you think is the actual percentage of the population that travels into luxury? 10%? 15%?
Less, surely,
I
right?
reckon smaller.
Yeah. 10%. Let's say 15%. You're looking at the 85%. There's going to be 1.9 billion people who are going to travel this year. That's what WTTC says. And 1.9 billion people. Ryanair, EasyJet, if you look at Indigo here, they're actually saying that the middle class, they're going to travel more this year and next year than ever before in the history of mankind. We, with 9,200 hotels, I was telling Raj, I was so impressed the last couple of days I've been staying at the JW. There are 30 people every day smiling at me. I don't get that at home. Nobody smiles at me at home. I'm going to move here. I'm telling you, this hotel, 30 people at the entrance every day saying good morning, namaste, and they're smiling. And I'm like, this is magic, man. I don't know how much they're paid, but I love it. I'm going to move here. So you better give me a good rate, mate. But 85% of the world is middle class. And this, with our 9,200 hotels around the world, and with the brands that we have, and I know that you guys are into that space as well, right? That's what we keep on hearing. You're opening brands in the mid-scale economy. That's where I believe the real future lies. There's 10%, 100%, they're going to travel, I love Raffles, I love Six Senses, I love all that. But 85% of the world is going to travel in an affordable way in a mid-scale and economy hotel, because they cater more for experiences, and they're going to spend their money am I going to spend my money taking my girlfriend in a great, I don't have a girlfriend, by the way, I should mention my wife. No, wrong, I hope you're not taping this. Actually, it's my wife, not my girlfriend. Oh, thank God, that was a slip of a tongue. So anyway, so I'm taking my wife to a beautiful restaurant instead of staying at the 600 hotel, a 600 euros a night hotel, but then I can afford more experiences. People make decisions not in tribes anymore. You know, in the past we used to say, oh, these people travel this way, and these people travel this way. That's not happening anymore. You see people with private jets and their kids. A week later, they get on an EasyJet fly to Marseille or Lyon, right?
So, Dimitri, 100% agree with you. And first and foremost, you're welcome.
Will you give me a good rate,
You're
though?
welcome to stay here anytime.
Yes.
Now, you know, Rajesh, Anuraag, and I will tell you this. Growing up in this country, they were only either luxury hotels or guest houses, right? There was no middle. And in most cases, you traveled and you stayed in the guest houses because you couldn't afford luxury hotels. So India, and I've always said this, has an incredible legacy of luxury.
Yes, 100%.
Which has been clearly established by the Indian-led brands. You've got to give credit, right?
Yeah, oh, sure.
Now, for us coming in, you've got to make sure you adapt to that environment. Now, to your point, there is incredible opportunity in the middle. But I will also say luxury space, if you track it, it's growing very strong double-digit year on year on year.
100%.
And the propensity for the customer to pay is going like this. In fact, what we saw coming out of COVID was luxury led the recovery. But that doesn't take away from your point that somebody will fly Indigo and show up at a St. Regis hotel because it's very comfortable, right? Some of the billionaires today are actually more comfortable flying Indigo than they are probably some of the other airlines.
And you know what the other thing is, and I don't know if you guys have seen that, is the trend now, they call it low luxury or slow luxury, even in the clothes you wear.
Lean luxury,
you know, that whole,
lean luxury,
that
excessive
whole,
luxury.
Whole brands, you know, the days that
I think
you would be like Louis Vuitton all over the place. You look like a rapper
just to
these
add
days,
one point to what Raj said, I think luxury, the trends that we have seen, and I'm sure Rajesh will lead us to some exact numbers and data points, is that it's getting democratized in a country like India. I mean, just to give you a fun fact, pre-COVID at the Leela, the median age of our guests was in late 40s. That was the typical Leela guest. We have seen now 70% of our guests today are in the age groups of 28 to 35 years of age. That's a staggering shift. So there is a propensity to spend, there is the aspirational value.
No, absolutely. So just building on and talking about data points and adding meat, and it's, since there was dispute between middle class and luxury, let me just say India.
I don't think it was dispute.
They all agree with me, there was no dispute.
I think everyone was right. I think everyone was right.
No, but the good news is that there's opportunity for both. And let me tell you, let me just give you some serious data points. I mean, these are projections for the next 5 years. So India is going to add about 140 million households, which is going to have annual income more than $5,000, which means budget, middle class will come, all of that will come in. And on the luxury side, we are going to add about 50 million households with an annual income of more than $10,000. And a subset of that is going to be, you know, 20 million, 30 million, more than $20,000. So you are going to have an opportunity on both. Let me tell you very interesting, another trivia to your point, Anuraag, on the age demographic changing. 90 million out of this 140 million households going to be headed by millennials. Millennials. So, you know, the buying behavior, the spending behavior is very different from millennials. So all of these demographics are only going to offer opportunity across segments, And with your permission, Anuraag, I wanted to add one important point on the experience, since we were talking about, you know, customer and, you know, differentiation on experience. And we all spoke about, and rightly so, the in-stay experience. But I think we should always also think about the holistic, full customer journey when we think about experience. Starting from trip planning, you know, how are you going to make sure that the discovery happens properly? How are you going to be, because, and the reason why I bring that up, because sometimes we struggle. where we come from and how are we trying to get the booking experience, how are we going to get the post-sales experience, how are we going to get, smooth in-stay experience. Let me give you one example. I don't think hospitality industry in India has found yet the Digi-Yatra equivalent moment. Smooth experience, right? You go to the airport, Digi-Yatra, everything is digital, you have the boarding pass, you are checking in, you're crossing the security in a separate line and so on and so forth. We don't have the Digi-Yatra moment today for hospitality industry for check-in. We've tried because, and that is our DNA, we've tried with technology and we still think the technology is available. But I think it's the mindset change that is needed. I think it's the inertia against technology adoption that needs to change. Like manyfold, if the hospitality industry to ride on this massive digital evolution wave, because you can do wonders to your digital experience. And some of that in stay you have applied. A lot of the technology is digital today, right? I mean, you don't really need any paper and pen and all of that. And I know there will be local regulatory challenges and all, but let me tell you, the way India is growing and has made sure some of the statutory transactions and the use cases are done digitally, smoothly, without any friction, you can imagine you can just overcome all kind of challenges that we might have in the physical world. So I think that's an important point on experience I think we should keep in mind.
Right. And I think, fully agree, I think hospitality, generally speaking, and me being a part of the industry as well, we have been a bit of late adopters when it comes to technology because we are ultimately a people's business that we believe in, not a technology company, but the shift is happening. So I was reading up on your app that you have, the beautiful app for Accor. So I was just wondering, because there's a lot of artificial intelligence and generative AI and all of that has gone into it. How different is it from what Raj has and what Alan has and what others have?
Listen, I think we follow each other pretty closely, I think I'd say.
Who follows whom?
Well, I think vice versa, I suppose. But the thing on AI, I mean, it's on the tip of everyone's tongue.
You have a mood match in your app. I think that's your app, right?
Which one?
Mood match feature in your app.
Okay.
Am I asking the right question to the right? Oops. So, okay, if I may.
Next question.
The mood match option, this is the Accor app, allows maps guest preference to offer the choice of hotel type.
Yeah.
There's
a comms professional out there somewhere for a call that can answer that question.
Yeah. But listen, on AI, I mean, everyone's talking a lot about AI, and we watch each other, and there's a lot of off-the-shelf stuff coming as well. We've all got, we call it a digital factory based out of Paris, which works a lot on technology, and I'm sure Marriott does the same thing, Hilton would do the same thing, Wyndham, everyone is in that sort of space. And I actually think it's a positive thing that everyone's creating something different, and then those things will morph and will get better and better. But on AI, like I said, everyone's talking about it, but it's kind of existed for a long time now, right? I mean, it's accelerating a lot quicker now, I think is probably the point.
Look,
but on the point, we're all into it.
The reason I touched on it earlier, I totally agree with Rajesh. I think digitizing the experience is going to be the key. And what we are seeing, I mean, as a company, we're spending about $2.5 billion on technology transformation in the next 2 years, basically. But what we are starting to see, if you look at early adoption, the ability to sell for our customer engagement center associate who was spending 15 minutes searching up different things to match what the customer wanted, now they can do it literally in a minute. Yeah. And they spend the rest of the time actually engaging with the customer,
Absolutely.
Personalizing the experience. This piece about, app check-ins and checkouts. Now, most countries we've nailed it, but some places like India, you still got to go to the desk, right, to show your iCard or Aadhaar card or whatever you want to call it, which kind of takes away from that digital experience. So those are the things we've got to work our way through. But today, as far as we are concerned, a Marriott customer can walk in and out of the hotel having stayed 3 or 4 days, not having to interact with one associate, if they chose not to. But if they chose to have all interactions with associates and not use technology, that's available as well, right? It's just that with local laws, sometimes you end up in these situations that you have to navigate and end up in front of people.
But to Rajesh's point and to Raj's, that's where we as an industry need to do a better job, right? So if you look at seamless travelers as a barrier to the luxury customer, well, we should stop talking about luxury and focused actually. All of our customers, including yours, Anuraag, are occasional based stay. People will stay in a luxury hotel, then fly Vistara to get to the next destination. You take your girlfriend and your wife, I'm assuming, to different hotels. Don't always use
not
your
always,
windows.
not always.
Staff discount. But if you look at the markets that are ahead of it, look at Face ID in China, right? There's been a lot of lobbying going on in China from the industry to get away from manual registration cards, to get away from the second level of security, as China called it, to be able to verify IDs. And so the government came on board, and particularly for Chinese nationals, installed Face ID. So what Indian nationals get to do at the airports here is a stepping stone towards it. But there are markets in the world that can be what our technology is designed to be, which is, to Raj's great point, which is completely seamless, to be able to interact with a hotel in your preferred environment, in your preferred language. So from our perspective, you can WhatsApp your orders, or you can WeChat it in China, or you can use Line in Japan, and not interact, because the customer of tomorrow prefers to do this, then they prefer to do this. But there are barriers in place, and we would do a better job as an industry if we lobbied against those barriers to help the industry and get to seamless experience, particularly for internationals at airports or at arrival in all of our hotels. And so there is a window here for this room, this body, and the India Hotel Association to liaise with government and help them understand that in some cases we're being a barrier to tourism GDP. And then, the machinations of how much who spends or who gets there first, it's all irrelevant in the greater scheme of things. So there is a collective power here if we want to continue to see the industry be industry leading and not just leading within India. And so I would say, as it relates to seamless travel, we're probably at the back of the pack as opposed to the front.
And there's guys couldn't say it better. There's one thing that we've seen in Europe, and I don't think you've got this problem here yet in terms of workforce. We fired 4 years ago, literally 4 years ago to the day, we fired 90% of our people in hospitality, right? We all did, because we had to survive. And a big portion of those guys didn't come back. Yep. And one of the things that I think we didn't estimate well, or we underestimated, was we talked about technology so much that people are saying, why should I go back to a business or an industry that is going to replace me with chatbots and robots? So I get the whole, and Raj is right, the whole seamless, and it's amazing, but there's a fine balance of how do you actually promote technology versus the human element of hospitality. Because my daughters, for example, they don't talk to me. They only talk to me on WhatsApp. They refuse to talk to me face to face. It's all about WhatsApp. And so they live in another world. And I ask them, why wouldn't you work in hospitality? They're like, yeah, but you're going to replace us with technology, right? I mean, there's going to be all automated and contactless check-ins, and you don't need receptions anymore. So we have to be very careful about all that thing about AI. And if I ask everybody in this room the definition of AI, I'm probably going to get about 400 different versions of a definition. Nobody really knows. Remember, our business, the fundamentals, since the day that Joseph and Mary traveled, and it was the Greeks who invented hospitality, but they perfected it. Since that day, the human interaction is absolutely key. No matter apps, technology, AI, whatever. Humans are the basic of our business.
Got it.
That's it.
The person, the human who's running the hospitality business, I mean, amongst the large teams that we have across the countries and globally, is the general manager. And this is the question on behalf of the general managers who are in the room. Consumers have changed, associates have changed, expectations have changed, technology has changed, sustainability is a real thing. you know, owner expectations, our ownership counterparties are becoming sharper. It's ultimately a real estate business. Return on capital deployed, ROI, is no longer ends at a GOP level. You're expected to service your debts as well and understand that owner's mind shit. What are the 2 or 3 things that you would expect from your GMs? Short answers, because we're running short of time. I know this could be a 1-hour discussion, but...
I'll tell you 2 things.
Yeah.
One, entrepreneurship.
Yeah.
Because today, if you're not leading from the front and really be looking at the business holistically as an entrepreneur and maximizing the top line on every front.
Second thing?
Second thing, the real sense of good hospitality. That
How are we helping our general managers to achieve entrepreneurship and real sense of good hospitality?
You can do both. There are many in this room that have done it over and over again. I will say this, because I'll tell you that real hospitality, the day it disappears, the hotel experience disappears.
The balance, Alan, between being an innkeeper, as expected since 100 years, and an asset manager.
Look, 100 years ago, it's exactly the same as it was today. You get there in a different way, the house is a little bit different. Best-in-class customer experience, best-in-class owner returns, best-in-class team experience, and do the right thing for the community that you trade. The first ever owner of a hotel had that expectation from the first ever general manager. There's a lot of different how to get there, but the role of a general manager is exactly the same as it would be, which is a balanced scorecard asset manager.
Yeah, listen, for me, I'd agree. If I go back to when I was a general manager, the general manager is the most important person in the hotel as far as driving the business, driving culture in the hotel. What the general manager is focusing on is what that hotel is going to be good at, and that business is going to be good at. Things have changed somewhat as far as some expectations, more about the processes than anything else. But the general manager was always responsible for the business, for the human capital, and for the asset that you are. And the asset is the brand and everything it was. And that was the same yesterday, today, and will be the same tomorrow. From when I say yesterday, the first time, which wasn't in Greece, when Jesus was born.
No, but the Greeks invented it.
Come on. But I really do think it's still similar, as far as most important person.
Anything?
No, I mean for me it's very simple. I watched the GM at JW again because I have such a present experience. Be in the room, take care of your team so they can take care of the asset, they can take care of the guest. That's what it's all about. It's not rocket science.
Rajesh, you are an invested outlier in this group. I know. Any feedback that you would have for the hospitality business? What do you think today our leaders need to do better?
Look, and I'll tell you about the GM first, because I wanted to build on what Rajeev had said earlier, as earlier part of our conversation. I think thanks to COVID and whatever we had to do because of, we had to take really harsh business decisions, the hardware is in place, but the software has taken a serious beating there at the hotels. In terms of just the service levels and the training levels and and that's, fundamentally because the talent has not really come back, to Dimitris' point as well. I think that, Dimitris, the point was not necessarily the world is going to get replaced with technology. It's going to be striking a right balance and pick up the areas where you want to just have the application of technology. So I would say that actually is the most important, probably the focus area. We were all talking about experience, but right now, that is a serious gap right now. So I think the GM has to bring that back. Numbers will happen. To be honest, the numbers, there is momentum, there are tailwinds and so on, right? So the momentum will happen. And I can't not help but reinforce the point again that if we believe that we are behind on technology adoption, why don't we just accelerate that? It's not happening. So we should do that more and more.
Well, thank you. Great takeaway. And we have almost achieved the impossible. We have finished on time. So unless there's any question from the audience.
Yes.
Mr. Bakaya.
Oh. Yes. Can we have a mic, please?
I think they're at the back.
Here.
Eyes.
Yeah, we can.
Yeah, okay. Highway. How do you see the development?
Hybrid.
Highway hotels.
Highway. I mean, thank you. We do believe that's the future. That's the future of our development, especially for Wyndham in India. That's the way we grew in China. We have 1,500 hotels in China. That's how we grew in China. That's how we grew in the United States. That's how we're growing in Brazil, which is the whole infrastructure development. That's how we keep on growing in the US with the Biden administration, 1.3 trillion infrastructure development. That's exactly what we believe we're gonna grow here. Highway, and I'll give you, AJ, another example. In the UK, you've got service stations with accommodation attached to it. We've got 120 of those service stations and Ramadas, Days Inn, and Super 8s next to the service station. It's one of the most profitable business that we've got. These businesses that just print money. Why? Because that's how people travel in those countries. So absolutely, highway development with accommodation and service stations, I think is the future in a country like India.
You know, and just to add on to what Dimitris said, so I actually think the way, I mean, it definitely has some potential, but the location and where you end up sort of looking at, just from a journey standpoint, because there's a lot of highway development is happening, but at the end of the day, if let's say we are talking about Delhi-Mumbai highway, along the way, then there's going to be, because it's still going to be a long journey, and then you end up thinking that there is there will be use case in the middle of the highway for the hotel, functional hotel, because I don't know whether we'll be able to find experiences around it. That is some potential. But if we are talking about like 2-3 hours, sort of a highway distance, and those fast roads, because people are literally. By the way, I'm just going to link this with also the long weekend sort of getaways, right? Massive trend that has picked up post-COVID, especially, which includes from consumer point of view on experience, also the driving part of it. So there is no stay involved in between. So we should keep some of these nuances in India in mind while we think about it.
The other thing, I mean, I was looking at your website the other day, the deal you've done with Tesla in the US, right? EV charging. I mean, Sebastian said it yesterday, sustainability is going to be the #1 focus and the #1 challenge that this country is going to have in the next few years. EV charging is going to be a huge opportunity. People will need places to charge their cars.
Thank you, gentlemen. We are timed out, but thank you very much for being amazing. Thank you.
Let's go. This is so exciting.
Yeah. Thank you.
Are you going to give me
Thank you, gentlemen, for that intriguing discussion. For our next session,